Billy the Kid's story has been told many times, and the tale truly is among the most famous classic Western folk tales. As I'm currently doing a small series on folk heroes of the Wild West, I couldn't help but dedicate a video to Billy the Kid, whose name has become synonymous with the Wild West. Without further ado, I hope you'll enjoy the story of Henry McCarthy, more commonly known as Billy the Kid. The real name of Billy the Kid was Henry McCarthy, born in 1859 in New York to Catherine and a father whose identity has been a topic of debate, though sources state his name was Patrick McCarthy. His mother remarried William Antrim after Patrick passed away and moved to Silver City in New Mexico, where William worked in the mines. Henry's mother contracted tuberculosis, and when Henry was 15, she passed away in 1874. After which Henry had to fend for himself. His stepfather wasn't too keen on raising him and broke contact soon after Catherine's death. Though Henry worked a side job at a hotel, he was 16 when he first went astray, as he was arrested for being in the possession of stolen clothes and weaponry. It made the Sunday Herald not necessarily because of the severity of the crime, but because he managed to escape from his prison cell, climbing through the chimney. The same news report theorized that Billy was merely used as a tool by another, older and more well-known criminal, Sombrero Jack. Billy fled, crossed the border into Arizona until he reached the Indian reservation. Around this time, he actually adopted the name Billy himself, and due to his youthful look, people refer to him as the Kid. He became a cowboy at the ranch owned by J.W. Smith, but within 2 years he went astray again as he killed his first man. A man that was notorious for being the town's bully, Frank Cahill. Cahill outsized Billy, and when he insulted him and the two got into an altercation, Billy managed to shoot Cahill in the stomach as he was thrown on the ground and jumped. Cahill was mortally wounded, and it didn't take long for Billy to become arrested by the judicial officer, Miles Wood. Once again, Billy managed to escape, and from now on he had to live on the run. He didn't waste any time and fled to Lincoln County, New Mexico, where he earned his money as a rustler and a gambler, until he met John Tunstall, an Englishman that owned a ranch on the Rio Feliz. The meeting was a little unorthodox, as Billy was rustling Tunstall's cattle when Tunstall caught him. He offered Billy a job instead of punishment, and a friendship grew between the two men. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to last, as two other men, the Irish immigrants Lawrence Murphy and Jimmy Dolan, ruled the Lincoln County ruthlessly. They owned the house, as they called the Murphy and Dolan mercantile and banking operation. They basically monopolized every industry in the Lincoln County, buying up land and suppressing any competition. They ensured protection of their monopoly with their own band of cronies, named the Seven Rivers Gang. Tunstall and his partner, the lawyer Alexander McSween, were competitors to the house, to which Murphy and Dolan didn't take kindly. A group of corrupt officials let Murphy and Dolan rule the town as if it was their own property, and they were not looking forward to competitors entering the scene. As Tunstall was eager to compete, he offered reasonable prices and thus stole clients of Murphy and Dolan. After arresting Tunstall legally, they tried to push him out in illegal manners, among which provoking him to a gunfight with gunslingers they hired, most of whom were members of the Jesse Evans gang. The town's corrupt sheriff, William Brady, was in the pocket of the house and was requested to ride onto Tunstall's territory in order to confiscate cattle. The news that Brady, together with Murphy and Dolan's men, were moving towards Tunstall's territory reached Tunstall and McSween. In February 1878, Tunstall, Billy, and a few other men rode out to meet the trespassers on the ranch. Once they met the group, a scuffle erupted in which Tunstall was singled out and shot dead, while the rest of his men weren't there to come to his aid. Tunstall's murder was the beginning of the Lincoln County War, the conflict between these two groups. After the killing of Tunstall, Billy and several other members of the group, among which McSween and Dick Brewer, swore to get revenge and formed the Lincoln County Regulators. They managed to obtain murder warrants from the Justice of the Peace, John B. Wilson, and from now on, their primary objective was to get vengeance. About a month later, in March, the regulators found two men that were there when Tunstall was killed, Frank Baker and William Morton. As the regulators confronted them, both men tried to escape the regulators and were subsequently shot. They would not be the last ones. On the 1st of April that same year, Sheriff Brady and two other deputies walked down the street as they were ambushed by the regulators. William Brady and George Hindman were killed, riddled with bullets. 3 days later, another firefight broke out between the regulators and the Seven Rivers gang members. This time, however, two regulators by the name of Buckshot Roberts and Dick Brewer were killed. In May, two McSween men were found dead, shot in a ditch by passerbys. They were killed in an ambush, and the Dolan faction now stepped up their harassment of McSween, and the conflict was slowly leading towards its climax. In July, McSween, together with Billy and a dozen or so other men, rode out towards Lincoln. Once arrived, McSween barricaded himself in his house together with his wife, sister, and 9 other men. Some others stationed themselves onto rooftops and at strategic locations in the town, and the next couple of days would be a waiting game. Upon hearing about this siege or protest, Sheriff George Pepin came to Lincoln with 40 men. He had arrest warrants for the regulators, who defended themselves in the barricaded houses, which meant they could not be arrested. While both sides were shooting at each other, the firefight wasn't heavy enough to force a surrender. Several regulators were killed, however, and Sheriff Pepin decided to ask the nearby army for help, as the whole process took too long, in his opinion. The regulators, still holding themselves up on rooftops, now moved towards the McSween house, which would be the main bastion for what was to come. Sheriff Pepin returned a couple of days later together with Colonel Nathan Dudley, who brought a troop of soldiers, a Gatling gun, and a cannon with him. The heavy weaponry was now aimed at the house, and the women were allowed to leave, although McSween's wife refused. After a standoff that lasted for a few more days, their firepower was unleashed on the McSween house, to no avail, and Sheriff Pepin and Colonel Dudley wanted to get the men out of the house through a last attempt. They set the house on fire. Mrs. McSween was allowed to leave the house once again, and now did so, as she pled with the sheriff to put out the fire. Sheriff Pepin, however, refused, and McSween and others had to get out of the house as they made a dash to the river behind it. As the men fled from the burning building, 4 men, including McSween, were killed. Our Billy shot in his thigh, though he did manage to flee together with multiple regulators. The confrontation would enter the history books as the Battle of Lincoln and would leave 5 regulators and 2 soldiers dead. Now that McSween was killed, the Lincoln County War came to an end as the McSween men weren't paid anymore. This also meant Billy had to find other enterprises in order to attain a living. In August, suddenly there was a peak in cattle being rustled in New Mexico, and Billy the Kid and his companions were blamed. Because of his troubled past, Billy was wanted for theft and multiple murders. A month later, the news of the Lincoln County War and the corrupt Santa Fe ring reached Washington, upon which President Rutherford B. Hayes fired Samuel Beach Axel, a pro-House governor, and replaced him with Lew Wallace, a well-known general that commanded troops during the Civil War, prolific writer, and already an American hero during his lifetime. Wallace attempted to stop the Lincoln County War hostilities and offered amnesty to the participants of the Lincoln County War, except for Billy, as he killed a sheriff and his deputy. As this power shift in the higher offices of the county was going on, Mrs. McSween hired a one-armed lawyer, Houston Chapman, to settle McSween's estate and sue Colonel Dudley for her husband's death. Chapman encountered 2 Lincoln men on the street a couple of days later, and he was shot. Billy witnessed the murder together with Tom O'Folliard and thus knew who had shot Chapman. Billy wrote a letter to Lew Wallace offering to testify before a grand jury against these killers, who were members of the Jesse Evans gang and other members of the House, if Wallace would grant him amnesty. Wallace agreed and offered Billy amnesty, upon which Billy turned himself in. He was held in jail to await the trial, but as he was imprisoned, Wallace skipped town, and Billy grew strong suspicions that he was being framed and Wallace would not hold up to his end of the deal, and that he would not be granted amnesty. As he had become rather skilled in escaping from prisons, he did so once again and joined his McSween friends. The next couple of months, Billy would rustle cattle together with his gang, albeit as one of the most wanted men of the United States. He would feature in most newspapers issued in New Mexico, and most towns had wanted posters for him. 1880 came along and Lincoln County was appointed a new sheriff, Pat Garrett. This Garrett was dead set on capturing Billy the Kid, and it didn't take him long to trace Billy and his gang. He captured him together with his posse of lawmen, and several regulators were killed in the ensuing shootout. Billy surrendered, was transported back to Santa Fe, and was eventually sentenced to hang at the Lincoln courthouse for multiple murders, among which that of Sheriff Brady. He was locked up for a while in the Lincoln courthouse under guard by 2 deputies. In April 1881, after he had asked if he could stretch his legs outside, Billy managed to slip out of his handcuffs and managed to take the gun from one of the deputies guarding him, James Bell, shooting him. The other deputy, Bob Ollinger, would meet the same fate. Now, with the deputies out of the way, Billy stole a horse and once again fled town. He would manage to stay under the radar for 3 months as the most wanted man of the entire country. He was being hunted down by Pat Garrett now, and as he killed 2 of his deputies, the whole ordeal became even more personal. As Billy was hiding, he fell in love with a girl, Polita Maxwell. Her brother, Pete Maxwell, supplied information to Garrett about Billy's whereabouts. He let Garrett know Billy was in Fort Sumner, and together with a gang of deputies, Garrett left for Maxwell's residence in order to question him. As the men were up talking late at night, it was dark in the room and only dimly lit. Suddenly, Billy the Kid walked in and could make out the shade of men sitting on the bed, asking "Quién es?" Spanish for "Who is it?" Garrett, recognizing Billy's voice, shot him twice, killing him instantly. It was July the 14th, 1881, and it marked the end of Billy the Kid, who was buried in a grave with a wooden cross. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting. And what is a person or event from the Wild West that you would like to know more about and perhaps see a video of? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to my channel. See you next time.